A torn fragment of a radio intercept, garbled and incomplete, captures a frantic Japanese pilot's breathless words. Impossible. Faster than any. Zero. Guns that cut through. The photograph taken hours later shows a downed Zero, its wings twisted in unnatural angles, a Hellcat silhouette etched in the smoky sky above. How could a machine so bulky and seemingly less agile outmatch the legendary Zero, the symbol of Japanese air superiority? The contradiction gnaws like a wound in the records of the Pacific War. The Hellcat, designed as a rugged workhorse by the US Navy, accounted for over 5,000 Zero kills by war's end. An overwhelming tally that shattered the long-held illusion of Zero invincibility. Was this a triumph of engineering or a failure of Japanese intelligence? What was the hidden calculus behind this staggering reversal in air dominance? The story begins in early 1942, amid the ruins of Pearl Harbor and the desperate scramble of US naval aviation. The Hellcat's genesis was rooted in a fierce rivalry between aircraft manufacturers and a pressing need for a fighter capable of withstanding the brutal realities of Pacific combat. The Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics demanded a fighter that could absorb damage, climb rapidly, and wield firepower sufficient to bring down the nimble Zero. The original blueprint, a thick-wing monoplane with a powerful Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, was a departure from the sleek lines of earlier fighters. A faded memo from a squadron commander reveals skepticism. Too big, too slow, not a dogfighter. Yet the airframe's armor and self-sealing fuel tanks concealed a secret. This was a beast built for survival and attrition. What internal debates at the Navy's design bureaus went unnoticed? How much of the Hellcat's success came from these calculated trade-offs, and how much was sheer luck? The Hellcat's specifications read like a manifesto against the Zero's strengths. With a top speed of 376 miles per hour at 23,400 feet, a service ceiling exceeding 37,000 feet, and 6.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, it was a formidable adversary. The Zero, by contrast, boasted superior maneuverability, but sacrificed armor and firepower for agility, carrying only two 7.7mm machine guns and two 20mm cannons. A blueprint discovered in a Mitsubishi engineer's file cabinet reveals a chilling admission. The Zero's light frame was a calculated vulnerability, intended to maximize range and evasiveness, but rendering it fragile. The Hellcat's rugged design allowed pilots to absorb hits that would have downed a Zero instantly. The sound of its powerful engine drowned out the screams of its damaged foes. Could this contrast in design philosophy explain why the Zero was so often outmatched? Why did Japanese engineers fail to anticipate the deadly endurance of the Hellcat? The Hellcat's baptism by fire came during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, June 1944, known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. U.S. Navy squadrons, equipped with Hellcats, engaged the Japanese fleet's air arm in a decisive clash. Initial Japanese reports described bewilderment. Their planes dive faster, climb higher, and their guns tear through our wings. Despite numerical inferiority, Hellcat pilots reported kill ratios of 7-to-1 against Zeros. A grainy combat camera footage shows Hellcats executing steep dives and high-speed turns, outpacing the enemy completely. The battle shattered Japanese morale and exposed glaring deficiencies in their tactics. Why did Japanese commanders cling to outdated dogfighting methods? How did U.S. training and pilot doctrine exploit the Hellcat's strength so effectively? In response, Japanese air strategists attempted to adapt. New instructions emphasized boom and zoom tactics, diving attacks followed by rapid climbs to counter the Hellcat's superior speed and firepower. Modifications to the Zero included reinforced armor and more powerful engines. Yet, archival records from intercepted communications reveal mounting frustration. Our pilots cannot close the distance without taking lethal fire. Despite these efforts, the Hellcat's resilience and pilot training continued to dominate. The Japanese Navy's failure to develop a successor capable of matching the Hellcat's attributes hinted at deeper issues: resource shortages, industrial bottlenecks, and perhaps a failure of vision. How much did Japan's shrinking war economy limit its ability to innovate? Were there internal fractures within the Japanese command structure that sealed their fate. By late 1944, the balance tipped irreversibly. The Hellcat, now mass-produced in thousands, became the backbone of U.S. naval air power. Detailed maps from carrier strike operations illustrate the shrinking Japanese operational envelope, with Hellcats prowling the skies over the Marianas, the Philippines, and the Pacific at large. A declassified pilot's journal describes the relentless pressure. They hunted us like wolves, never tiring, never giving quarter. The Zero's myth of invincibility lay shattered, replaced by a grim reality of attrition and overwhelming force. The Hellcat was not just a plane, it was a symbol of industrial might and tactical evolution. Was the Hellcat's triumph inevitable once the war's resources tilted overwhelmingly in America's favor? Or was there a hidden edge in its design and deployment that remains underestimated to this day? Each episode is a document I pull from the dust of the archives. Share your own stories. Many of you have relatives who lived through that time, and your words help connect personal memory with archival evidence. Stay curious. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode tomorrow. In the cramped briefing room aboard the USS Lexington, a squadron commander spread out weathered maps marked with red and blue ink, tracing the paths of Hellcat patrols and Zero interceptions. The humidity clung to the walls like a shroud, while the low murmur of radio chatter underscored the tension. Pilots shared uneasy glances. The Hellcat's reputation was growing into a specter haunting Japanese skies. Yet a classified report from naval intelligence hinted at a deeper layer. Japanese pilots were not merely outgunned. Many were overwhelmed by the Hellcat's unexpected acceleration and ruggedness. Intercepted radio transmissions revealed startled voices. They don't spin out. Their planes just keep climbing. How had the Japanese air doctrine, built around nimble dogfights, failed to predict a fighter that could absorb hits and outpace them in sustained climbs? Was the Hellcat's dominance a consequence of tactical innovation or an unrecognized psychological weapon? The contrast between pilot training programs further illuminates this disparity. U.S. Navy records depict rigorous simulation drills focusing on gunnery accuracy, formation flying, and energy management. The Hellcat's cockpit was designed with pilot ergonomics in mind. Clear instrumentation, robust controls, and a forgiving airframe. In contrast, Japanese training, constrained by dwindling resources and experienced pilot losses, increasingly relied on rushed instruction and less experienced aviators. A faded photograph shows a young Japanese pilot clutching his helmet, eyes wide with uncertainty, beside a battered Zero. This loss of seasoned airmen compounded the Hellcat's advantage, turning engagements into battles of attrition the Japanese could ill afford. How much did the human factor, training, morale, fatigue, tip the scales in favor of the Hellcat? Could the Japanese command have stemmed this tide with better pilot preservation strategies? The Hellcat's engineering also concealed innovations that caught Japanese engineers off guard. Its powerful R2800 engine was paired with a large propeller and a durable airframe capable of withstanding hits that would cripple lighter fighters. The plane's self-sealing fuel tanks and armor plating allowed pilots to return home even after sustaining critical damage. A schematic found in a U.S. Navy archive highlights these features, annotated with notes emphasizing survivability. Japanese pilots often reported seeing Hellcats return from multiple hits, while damaged Zeros spiraled uncontrollably. This resilience forced Japanese tactics into desperation. Pilots had to deliver fatal blows quickly or risk a prolonged engagement favoring the Hellcat. Why did Mitsubishi's engineers underestimate the importance of survivability in air combat? Was this a cultural or industrial blind spot that sealed the Zero's fate against the Hellcat's ruggedness? The psychological impact on Japanese pilots was profound. Transcripts of debriefings reveal a growing sense of dread when facing Hellcats, an enemy that was not just faster and tougher, but seemingly endless in their aggression. The sound of the Hellcat's radial engine became synonymous with death in the air. A grainy wartime photograph shows a Japanese squadron returning from a mission, faces drawn and eyes hollow. This fear eroded combat effectiveness and willingness to engage. Meanwhile, U.S. pilots reported a surge in confidence, emboldened by the Hellcat's reliability and firepower. How did this shift in morale shape the air war over the Pacific? Did the Hellcat's design unwittingly contribute to psychological warfare, breaking the spirit of Japan's once feared aviators? Despite repeated attempts, Japanese attempts to develop a new fighter to counter the Hellcat faltered. The Nakajima Ki-84 and Kawanishi N-1K were introduced late in the war, but production delays, fuel shortages, and pilot inexperience hampered their effectiveness. Archival production schedules reveal a grim reality. By 1945, Japan's industrial capacity was crippled, unable to match the relentless output of American factories churning out Hellcats by the thousand. A photo of a deserted Mitsubishi assembly line, with tools rusting and parts scattered, captures the collapse of Japanese air power infrastructure. Was this industrial disparity the true decisive factor, or did the Hellcat's technical superiority and tactical employment merely accelerate an inevitable decline? The final blow came in the closing months of the war, when Hellcats dominated carrier operations during the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Detailed flight logs show Hellcat pilots executing coordinated strikes that annihilated Japanese airfields before fighters could scramble. Zero, once a symbol of aerial supremacy, was relegated to desperate kamikaze missions. A haunting image from Okinawa depicts a lone Hellcat circling above a shattered runway, the remnants of Zeros scattered like fallen ghosts below. The Japanese Navy's inability to adapt or replenish trained pilots ensured that the Hellcat's kill count continued to climb unchecked. What does this relentless attrition reveal about the interplay of technology, strategy, and human endurance in war? Was the Hellcat's dominance a product of superior design alone, or the culmination of an overwhelming systemic collapse? The Hellcat was more than a fighter. It was a revelation that dismantled myths and reshaped naval aviation. Its story is etched not only in kill tallies, but in the shattered expectations of its adversaries. Behind the statistics lies a complex tapestry of innovation, adaptation, and human cost. A narrative still unfolding through the voices preserved in forgotten archives. What remains, hidden in those faded documents? How many untold stories linger in the silence between the gunfire? In the dim glow of a cramped briefing room aboard a U.S. aircraft carrier, a pilot's hand traced the jagged flight path of a Hellcat dogfight over the Philippine Sea. The map's edges frayed and stained with sweat. The crackle of static-laced radio transmissions filled the background, voices alternating between triumph and urgent warnings. Among these intercepted fragments lay a chilling pattern. Japanese pilots trained in close-quarters dogfighting found themselves repeatedly outpaced and outgunned. The Hellcat's combination of speed, firepower, and ruggedness rendered traditional tactics obsolete. A detailed combat report noted, "The enemy's turn rate is inferior. Attempts to engage at close range result in devastating losses." How did the Japanese command fail to anticipate this tactical mismatch? Was there a fundamental misunderstanding of the evolving nature of aerial warfare? At the heart of this tactical failure was the Zero's design philosophy, which prioritized maneuverability and range over protection and firepower. A faded technical manual recovered from a downed Zero revealed meticulous calculations aimed at weight reduction, sacrificing armor, and self-sealing fuel tanks to achieve unmatched agility. In contrast, the Hellcat's designers embraced a different doctrine. Survivability and firepower were paramount. The aircraft's robust frame and powerful engine allowed pilots to absorb punishment and respond with overwhelming force. A photograph from a crashed Hellcat's cockpit showed instruments battered yet intact, a testament to its durability. Could this fundamental divergence in design priorities explain the staggering kill ratio? Why did Japanese engineers persist with a fragile design despite mounting evidence of its vulnerabilities? The human element deepened the divide between the two fighters. U.S. Navy pilot training emphasized energy, tactics, maintaining altitude, and speed to control engagements, skills perfectly suited to the Hellcat's strengths. Conversely, Japanese pilots were steeped in traditions of close-turning dogfights, exploiting the Zero's agility. Intercepted training records from the Japanese Navy reveal persistent efforts to retrain pilots in boom and zoom tactics, but these came too late and were undermined by pilot attrition. A grainy photo of a training flight shows young aviators struggling to master new maneuvers, their aircraft trailing smoke in simulated attacks. How much did this clash of combat philosophies contribute to the Hellcat's dominance? Was the Japanese Air Force's failure to adapt a symptom of deeper institutional rigidity? Battlefield observations confirm these disparities. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, Hellcat pilots reported repeated success in diving attacks, using their aircraft's superior speed and firepower to strike before Zero pilots could react. Combat footage reveals Hellcats streaking down from higher altitudes, unleashing bursts from their 6.50 caliber machine guns, cutting through the thin-skinned Zeros like paper. Japanese pilot testimonies speak of desperation. "We could not close the gap. Their guns tore through us long before we could respond." The Hellcat's ability to engage from beyond the Zero's effective firing range shifted the dynamic decisively. Why did Japanese aerial tactics remain tethered to outdated dogfighting models? Could more flexible doctrine have altered the course of these encounters? Beyond tactics, the Hellcat's logistical advantages compounded Japan's woes. The U.S. industrial complex produced over 12,000 Hellcats, ensuring a constant supply of fresh aircraft and replacement parts. In contrast, Japan's manufacturing capacity dwindled under relentless bombing campaigns and resource scarcity. A stark photograph of a deserted Japanese airfield littered with wrecked Zero fuselages contrasts sharply with the bustling American assembly lines churning out Hellcats. This imbalance extended to maintenance and pilot replacement, with U.S. forces benefiting from well-established training pipelines and repair facilities. How critical was this industrial disparity in sustaining Hellcat dominance? Did Japan's inability to replenish aircraft and pilots seal the Zero's fate as much as tactical inferiority? The psychological toll on Japanese pilots was profound. Intercepted radio chatter reveals growing anxiety and fatalism. They come like thunder, unrelenting and unstoppable. The Hellcat's reputation as an indestructible hunter sowed fear and hesitation, eroding morale. Meanwhile, U.S. pilots, buoyed by their aircraft's performance and superior training, developed aggressive tactics that exploited Japanese caution. A rare photograph captures a U.S. Navy pilot grinning amidst the chaos of battle, his Hellcat bearing scars yet still flying. How did this psychological dynamic influence engagement outcomes? Was the Hellcat's success as much a product of human factors as mechanical superiority? In the final months of the war, the Hellcat's dominance was unmistakable. Carrier air groups equipped with Hellcats provided critical air cover during amphibious assaults, decimating Japanese air resistance and securing American advances. Detailed operation logs from Okinawa describe sweeping Hellcat patrols, intercepting and destroying any approaching Zero formations with ruthless efficiency. A haunting image from these operations shows a solitary Hellcat silhouetted against a blood-red sunset, circling a battlefield strewn with the wreckage of once proud Japanese fighters. As Japan's air power crumbled, the Hellcat's legacy as the Zero's nemesis was cemented. What does this relentless ascendancy reveal about the interplay of technology, doctrine, and industrial might? Was the Hellcat's victory inevitable, or did it embody a unique confluence of factors that remain partially obscured in history's shadows? In the aftermath of Okinawa, as the smoke cleared over shattered airstrips and silent hangars, the Hellcat's shadow loomed larger than ever. Pilots' journals from the front lines describe a grim new reality. The Zero, once the embodiment of Japanese air prowess, was reduced to a relic, outmatched and outnumbered. A weathered photograph shows a group of exhausted Japanese aviators gathered around a solitary, battered Zero, their faces etched with resignation. Behind this image lies a deeper story, one of systemic collapse, resource scarcity, and the unrelenting pressure of a war machine that had outpaced Japan's capacities. The Hellcat's design, while formidable, was but one piece in a larger mosaic of industrial strength, pilot training, and tactical evolution. What remains obscured in these final days is how much of Japan's defeat was sealed by factors beyond the cockpit: logistics, intelligence failures, and strategic miscalculations. The Hellcat's kill count, over 5,000 Zeros destroyed, stands as a grim testament not only to the aircraft's capabilities, but to the shifting tides of war. Yet, archival documents hint at untold stories lurking beneath the numbers: pilots who fought bravely despite overwhelming odds, engineers who struggled to innovate under siege, and commanders who grappled with impossible choices. A faded letter from a Japanese squadron leader, found in a private collection, mourns the loss of airmen and the fading dream of aerial dominance. The Hellcat's triumph was not merely a mechanical victory. It was a narrative of adaptation, resilience, and the brutal calculus of total war. How many voices remain unheard in this saga? What lessons lie buried in the wreckage of these once prized fighters?